Hello gamers, and welcome back to another episode of Solospelunking. And this episode will be a very different episode. It will be a Solospelunking table talk, which means it will not feature any gameplay. You will hear me rambling about the story of my gaming life. And I will tell you why that is. Um, if you listen closely, you might hear that I still sound a little ill because last week I caught a cold, a nasty, serious cold. So my nose is all clogged up, and my voice is, or my throat is itchy, and I have to cough. And I just, this is also why I didn't release a midweek video this week. I was just not up to gaming in front of a camera. I I was just I didn't feel up to it. And tonight actually I wanted to, or I was planning on doing a gameplay video featuring Raya, my Eldrillian Shadowhuntress, and Nesh Duncan, and I wanted to continue my adventures in the Keldor sector season 2. However, I still don't really feel up to it because work is crazy at the moment. I had some pretty long days, and I got my hot mint tea here, so I'm still doing the best to get rid of this cold. But I still wanted to do a video. I didn't want to leave you hanging, my loyal viewers who I know you are all waiting impatiently for the weekend so that you can watch another solo spelunking video. So I don't want to leave you hanging. This is, of course, a little sarcasm, but only a little. So I figured I could just tell you a little bit about me because I've been on YouTube now for over a year, but I think you haven't really gotten to know me from a personal side. All right, so you maybe know a couple of things, but I figured I could tell you just a little bit more about myself, but I will do this by telling you the story of my gaming life because gaming has been a part of my life since my very early, no, not my very early, but my early pre-teenage years, and it had stayed with me through all the stages of my life, up until now, through high school, college, adulthood. So it's always been an important part of my life. It is my most beloved hobby. I do have a few other hobbies. I like to watch movies, obviously. I like to play video or computer games. I also do sports a lot less than I should do actually in my age, but still, I was very active in my youth, and I still try to at least get some sort of regular workout in. Um, but gaming is like the main my main hobby, my main focus, where I put all my creative energy in, and I always have. So and yeah, so I if you want to come with me on a trip through memory lane, you're invited. It all started in the summer of 1988. So I was born in 1977. So by the summer of 1988, I was 11 years old, and this is when it all started. And as it is often the case, at least from the stories that I've heard so far, there are always some maybe older siblings, brothers, friends of friends involved that are maybe like a year or two older that have probably also introduced you into role playing or board games or whatever games. And this was also in the case in my case. So full disclosure, I'm an only child, so I did not have any siblings, but I had cousins, lots of cousins, because my mother, she had a lot of, or has a lot of siblings. And my cousins, or two of my cousins, were visiting. They were visiting us in Berlin, and we all stayed. So I stayed with them at my grandmother's. We were three boys, and I was the youngest. So I was 11 years old, and they were 12 and 13. So it was like a perfect spread. And the oldest of my cousins, he got this game right here. And this is the re-release. This is the original German role-playing game. The first role-playing game that was available in Germany, of course, inspired by Dungeons and Dragons. They wanted something for the German market. And this is Das Schwarze Auge, or as it is called in English, The Dark Eye. And this re-release box here is the second edition, which was released in 1988. So it was basically hot off the press. And my oldest cousin, he was 13 years old, he bought it. And back then you didn't order stuff online. There was no internet and everything. Of course, the ones that are a little bit older know that. So you actually had to go into a store. And back then there weren't really these, what we now call the friendly local gaming stores. So you actually, he picked this up in a regular toy store. And I know as if it was yesterday which toy store it was and where in Berlin it was. And so he got this and he read through this. These are the more expanded rules that were in the basic box, but there's also like a small little beginner adventure booklet. Let me show this to you. So this is the re-release that came out, and I got this for reasons of nostalgia. I might as well probably play it, but maybe not on the channel. So that was, and you can see it here, Rulebook 1, Rulebook 2. This was called The Path to Adventure, Der Weg ins Abenteuer in German. And it was eine Einführung in das Rollenspiel, so an introduction into role-playing gaming. And this is what we played. And we were all players, and my aunt, she actually took the role of the game master back then. And we played this introductory adventure that was included in this book, a small little dungeon crawl here. The first adventure, it was called Sylvanas Befreiung, or basically Sylvanas Rescue. Classic adventure where you had to rescue a kidnapped girl from a group of orcs and pirates that was held for ransom. Yeah, and so that was the adventure. And it also came, of course, with a floor map. That was this one right here. So that was the map of the very first dungeon. And this is what we played. This is what we played. And my aunt, she was acting as the game master. And I was immediately hooked. Because this was so atmospheric. And I have to admit, she did a pretty good job as a game master. This was so atmospheric, and I could totally feel that I was in the action. And from this moment on, I got hooked, and basically, excuse me, basically never stopped. And back then also, because I was hooked, and I actually wanted to play more than I could, because we only had this one adventure. And of course my aunt, she didn't of course want to be the game master all the time. So even though we couldn't play, I was hooked, and I read the rule book front to cover. And back then I started my very, very first attempts at very primitive, from today's perspective, solo role-playing attempts. So basically, I did like, I didn't even do random dungeons. I drew a primitive overland map, and then I had like simple quests like go there, get this, and just random encounters, and it was basically just combat using this rule system. And those were my very first and primitive attempts at solo role playing, and they didn't last long. But the core message here is that I got hooked and that I never stopped from this point on. So it was summer 1988 when it all started. And then I entered the era that I call here, and I made a little disclosure. I made a little script for this video, not really a script, but some bullet points to get those time periods right. And then came the era that I am calling the golden era of gaming. And you can probably guess what era that was, because those were my senior high school years. So when I was out of elementary school and I entered high school, and in Germany it's a little bit different than in the US. So you have, depending on what school you go to, but the school I went to, you had 13 years of senior high instead. So you finished in 13th grade and not in 12th grade. And so from around 1989 till 1997. Those were my teenage high school years, and this was basically the golden era of gaming. I didn't have a girlfriend back then. I actually only started dating seriously when shortly before I turned 18. Uh, so um, so I didn't have a girlfriend, and we had basically unlimited amounts of time. We didn't have any responsibilities, even though when I got older, I did have a job. So, like a job that you have when you're in school, like a minimum wage part time job. But that was nothing compared to like working full time as an adult. So we had unlimited amounts of time. We had basically no responsibilities. I didn't have a girlfriend. And so we did seriously night long sessions in my home basement, in my parents' basement. Um, we played, so I had like different groups, but there were like a core group of people, like my two oldest role playing friends that I still friends with today and that I visit every once in a while. So the guy in Switzerland and another guy that left Berlin after his studies and lives in Lower Saxony now. And I try to visit at least, I visit them at least once a year. So we were like the core gaming group, and we played through all of our high school years, like I said, night long sessions in the basement, unlimited amount of time, no responsibilities. And this is what we played. The Dark Eye was our main system. And I was, of course, or not of course, but somehow it happened that I always was the GM. Uh, there were very few instances when I got to play, but basically I was what you would call now the forever GM. And we also didn't play published adventures. So back then it was already all made up, and back then I already started tinkering with rules and making up own adventures and drawing maps and drawing dungeons and experimenting with all kinds of rules modifications. And yeah, like I said, the golden age or era of gaming. And during that time, I also came into contact with Dungeons and Dragons for the first time, with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition. Because while I was in high school, in Germany, you had the opportunity to make like an exchange student year in a foreign country. And I did an exchange year as a student in the United States, in the state of New York, so New York State, not New York City. Um, up near Lake Ontario. And so I spent the high school year 93, 94, I think it was. Or was it 92, 93? I don't, yeah, I think it was 93, 94. So during that school year, um, I spent a high school year, 11th grade in the United States. And of course, I also there got into contact or made friends with role players. But of course, they didn't know anything about the Dark Eye, obviously. Dungeons and Dragons was the thing. So this is what we played. And I even got the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons second edition player's handbook for myself as a personal copy. And my very first Advanced Dungeons and Dragons character ever created was, of course, so some things just never change. He was a thief. He was a thief, and his name was Rero Rex. And because nobody could say Rero Rex, he was always called Rero. And this is why basically all my or a lot of my rogues that I play in fantasy settings, also in my solo games, this is like my go-to standard rogue name is Rio, spelled R-E-O, Rio. And this came from indeed my very first AD&D second edition character Rero Rex, who was always called Rero. But because Rero is too cumbersome, it became Rio. And this is now my go-to fantasy thief, rogue, scoundrel kind of soldier of fortune name. Yeah, so that was when I first came in contact with Dungeons and Dragons, but I have to admit I only played it while I was staying in the US and I didn't play it afterwards back in Germany. We went back to our old stuff. And so this is what we played. And shortly before I finished high school, I then discovered the Star Wars D6 system in the mid 90s. And then we also played that as well. And we also switched to Star Wars. So we played it. We played both systems. And also back then I was always tinkering with the rules and everything. And then when I graduated from high school, that was in 1997, I joined the German military, the German Air Force to be precise, to serve a 3-year term and go through reserve officer training in the German Air Force. So from 1997 till 2000, I was a soldier, but I'm not a veteran, so I was never deployed, didn't see any actual combat, so I just did reserve officer training. And so it was a 3-year term, and I left the service in 2000 as a second lieutenant of the reserve. And during that time, this is what I call from 1997 to 2000, more or less the dry years. Because I was away from home, I was stationed in southern Germany, in Bavaria, near Munich. And by that time, I also had my girlfriend that I basically dated for about 6 years. So she was like my first serious, real girlfriend. So we met when I shortly before I turned 18, and we basically dated all through our last high school years up until I joined the service, or even while I was in the service. So you know where this is going. I was away from home, so away from my regular gaming group. I came home on the weekends, but then of course the time on the weekend was of course reserved for my girlfriend because we were still dating and still together then. So I didn't have the people to play with, and also I didn't have the time to play because the weekends were reserved, like I said, for my girlfriend. However, during that time I still kept reading rule books. The Death Star Technical Manual that I showed you, I bought this in a role-playing store, and then this was the time where they indeed already had dedicated role-playing stores. I bought this one in a store in Munich, and I did find a gaming group in Munich, and we played sparsely, I would say. They were nice people, but it was clear that I'm only there for a short amount of time, and I didn't know them before, and so it was basically we just got together for the game. So I played sparsely in that time. So even though this was also a very exciting period in my life because of the experiences I made, from a gaming perspective, this is what I would call the dry years, basically. All right, so then my military time or career was over. I left the military in 2000 and started basically my college education. I got my bachelor's degree. So from 2000 till 2003, I was back in Berlin, and I went to college, and I got my bachelor's degree in public administration. So I was working, I'm still working in the public sector. And this is what I call the online era. Because at that time, my friends, so like I said, high school was already over for a couple of years. Like I said, I was basically away for 3 years in the service. They did their studies. So one of these guys, this is why he's living in Switzerland now. So he completed his education and he went to work in Switzerland. The other one was still in Berlin, but we basically didn't have our old group. So like I said, these were not the dry years, but this is what I call the online era, this time period, because this was the time when the very first MMOs started to appear. And one of those MMOs, you've probably heard of it, Ultima Online or Ultima Online. And this Ultima Online, I didn't know if it was or is legal. I didn't care. There was a server emulation software available. I don't know, or I don't know anymore what it was called, that allowed people to run their own servers to host Ultima Online games, but as a persistent world. So if you had a server where this software was running, you could have your own Ultima Online world where you could play. These free servers were called shards or free shards, and there was a German-speaking one. Even though it had an English name, it was called Old World, and this was a role-playing heavy, Germany-based, with German players populated, German-speaking free shard that was very, very heavy on RP. It focused very heavily on RP, so you couldn't just apply in order to become a member of the server or to be able to play on this server. You literally had to write an essay to the administration team where you had to describe what, in your opinion, is good role playing, how you consider good role playing, or what you consider good role playing, what it is important to you, and you had to submit a character expose, basically. So you couldn't just create a character there. So you had to think beforehand what kind of character you wanted to play, and you had to write a backstory about this character, and you had to submit this backstory together with your essay to be granted access to this server. So there were no random player killings going on. It was actually forbidden. Everything had to have like a story purpose. There were different guilds and factions that were established, and there were also, for example, magic was very restricted. In order to become a full spellcaster and get access to all available spells in the engine, you actually had to complete an in-game training and take an in-game exam to be granted the title of mage and to be granted access to all the different spells. And this actually, and this is also like a little I was drifting very close there to the dark side, because you all heard of addiction to online gaming. There were people that blew their entire careers because they couldn't get away from World of Warcraft. And I started actually to notice similar patterns in my behavior, because this world actually, it was always available. No matter what time you logged in there were always players, people available. And my character, I played a ranger with a military background. So he was a deserted military scout, and he deserted because he was set on a recon mission. And we were supposed to recon an enemy forces camp, but the camp turned out to be just a normal village. But so that we don't get detected, the superiors decided to sack the village anyway, and to burn it to the ground, and to kill everyone, to leave no witnesses. And this was like the incident that caused me to become a deserter and leave this country, and basically travel to this other continent where this old world basically was based. So my background was a former military scout who deserted because of something he did in his military past and career, and this event was still like basically haunting me. It had like an impact on me. And so but I actually, then I made friends with the wood elves on this world, and became very involved in their community in game. So I was really involved in this game, and my character was also well established, well known in this world. But the thing is, like I said, it is always available. You can log in whenever you want. There are always people there to play. There were always also sometimes in-game events. So it was very easy to get hooked and basically to get addicted, because I figured like by during this time I was in college, like I said, but I realized that I basically did the bare minimum I had to do, but my main focus was on playing this game. When I came home, I turned on my computer. That was also the time when the first internet flat rates appeared. I played with a modem. I don't know if some of you know what this is. So it was nothing compared to the internet today, but it worked. And I spent day and night in this world. Seriously. It was, so when I was not playing, I was thinking about playing. And when I came home, I turned on the computer. I also had my own little apartment by that time. So this is when I started to develop a little bit, I would seriously say now, of an online addiction. This game became my main focus. However, I didn't fall too deep into this hole, because then I suddenly, it made click, and I decided, no, it was the time when the final exams came near. Yeah, when my college education was almost over, it was time for the final exams to get your degree, and I figured, no, I have to set my priorities right, and I went cold turkey, meaning I said farewell to everybody in the game. I said, like, I have to focus on real life now. This is not working anymore. And then I completely deinstalled the game so that the the hurdle to log in was just too high, because also back then it was not very well. I just reinstall it. There was no Steam client, no nothing. It was actually a painstaking process. So you had to install the game. Then it went through an hour-long update process, downloading all the patches because the internet was so slow. Then you had to set up your server connection. So it was nothing compared to what it is today. So actually, by deinstalling it all, it actually was like cold turkey, seriously. From And I've never again played this game afterwards, up to this day, seriously. And yeah, so that was from 2000 to 2003. And then when I got my college degree, I left Berlin. I started my professional career and I moved to where I'm living now, um, to the area around Cologne. And those were the years like from 2003 till 2008. During that time, I managed to find a regular gaming group in the city of Bonn, by, of course, visiting the stores, talking to people. And so we had a regular gaming group. We played Star Wars D20 system. And yeah, this lasted until 2008. And I also, during that time, I started, or also 2003 to 2008, this was also the regular gaming group role playing era, but also the beginning of the Star Wars miniatures game. I think, let me see, do I have a miniature from the very first set? Rebel Storm, I don't know, but I think the Star Wars miniature game, I think it came out at around 2003 or at the end of 2002, something around that. So I was like, the first boosters that came out, I bought them. So I was like with the game from the very first day. I bought the very first starter set, um, that was available for the very first line of miniatures, that was Rebel Storm back then. So so this went parallel. I had a miniatures gaming group that I'm still playing with today. So this is my Cologne gaming group. We met through the Star Wars miniature game, and um, we pretty soon started to play also the miniatures game in a scenario based manner, where you created custom characters according to rules. I don't want to praise myself here, but according to rules that I created. So I created the first draft, I introduced it. We play tested it. So not tasted, we tested it. We made modifications. We developed own special abilities, and we created our own encounter mechanisms and scenarios. And yeah, and this is also what I featured on this channel here. So and I think in my community tab from or in the description of these videos, I think I also put a link to my solo scenario rules package that we created for the Star Wars miniatures game. Because of course we played it, that one guy was running the enemies, but we also played it cooperatively with the enemies spawned randomly by encounter tokens, and we had custom tailored encounter tables for the scenarios. and also with automated opponent rules, like with simple AI rules that that provided a guideline um, of how the enemies would act. So this was like the area from 2003 to 2008. And in 2008, I met my now wife. So we started dating in 2008. We married in 2010. So we're also together now for almost, I think, 17 years this year. Yeah, married since 2010. And I remember it also as if it was yesterday, because this was when I then finally started solo gaming for real. Um, I was, like I said, those are these memorable moments that you probably, that I would probably recall even in 10, 15 years from now. So we went to bed and she was already asleep, and I always like go to bed late. So I had a little, I didn't have a tablet back then. I had one of these little netbooks, an Asus EPC. And on that EPC, while I was laying in bed, my yeah, back then girlfriend was asleep. I was reading the PDF of the first edition of Mythic that I got. And yeah, even though I don't use Mythic because I don't like this structured approach of using scenes and scene changes and interrupt scenes and the structured gameplay. I'm more a freeform gameplay guy playing in like an open sandbox world. But the fundamental principles that were introduced in Mythic, like the concept actually of a yes no oracle, the concept of interpreting prompts, the concept of asking one or two leading questions and then combining this with your common sense and the events that have already happened in the story to come up with a logical, fitting interpretation, and how it was all described and put together. This is what first, yeah, got me onto this solo role playing game train. So that must have been around, I put down here in my little script that I had, at around the year 2009. So I put down here I discovered true solo gaming through Mythic. But then reading it and actually applying these principles into practice are two completely different shoes. And I've brought this example up a couple of times, I think, in my how-to solo videos, because I don't only remember how I was reading Mythic, I also remember my first clumsy, totally clueless attempt of my first session. I wanted to play a Star Wars D6 system, which in my opinion now is totally not suited for solo role playing games, because you have to do all the dice rolling for both sides with damage resistance rolls, dodging rolls, etc. So not good for solo gaming. I like the system because I have fond memories like from my teenage golden era gaming years in the basement, but for solo gaming, at least in this original version, I wouldn't use it. But I tried it and I completely failed. So I sat there, I had my character sheet, I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure, should I talk to myself or do I have to write everything down or whatnot? And but I stuck with it because I saw the potential. And this is like in every solo gaming video, you see these questions: why solo? And for me, it was because I I always wanted to play more than I could. Um, my my older friends, they basically they discovered other interests, and so my wife, even though she's lovely, she is not a gamer at all. So gaming is totally not her thing. So I can't, or I couldn't rely on her or game with her. She wants to have nothing to do with it. So that's not an option. So yeah, so I actually stuck with solo gaming, and I have to say I've never looked back, and now it has become my most beloved hobby, my actual form of role playing. I don't play role playing games in a group anymore. We do have our gaming group, but we play like story themed board games. Like I said, right now we are playing Imperial Assault, all the campaigns and expansions. Before that, we have played the Star Wars miniature game in a scenario mode. We have played X-Wing, the miniature game, but also with these. I think they're on board game. No, what is Board Game Geek? There's also like a fan-made cooperative campaign mode, also with automated solo rules for the enemy ships. And now there was, even when the game was still live, an official solo supplement out for it. So we played this for a short while. We played the living card game, the Star Wars living card game. We have played Fantasy Dungeons and Dragons miniature dungeon crawls. We have played all these things, but never regularly a pen and paper campaign. And I got to be completely honest with you, I don't even know if I'm still group compatible after so many years of solo gaming. And I enjoy solo gaming so much because of those benefits. You can try out whatever system you want. You can try whatever character you want. You can change systems every session if you want. Nobody cares. And if I want to spend an hour doing a sabacc tournament, I can do that playing solo. It would be difficult in a group, I guess, if you're not on the same page. Yeah, so this is when it started at around 2009 with my discovery of Mythic, my first failed attempts, but I always stuck with it. I stuck with it, and now I'm at a point where I can say that I have, for me, this is for me personally, I have found my perfect way of playing solo off camera and on camera. I have refined my techniques and mechanisms, and um, yeah, I am so bold. I am so bold and say that I would consider myself somewhat of a solo gaming professional by now, because I've done it over a decade. Um, yeah, and those of you who have checked out some of my products, I'm not saying they're all great, but um, um, I I think I'm confident enough to have a grasp on solo gaming now to be able to create these things like these hybrid games or the toolbox, or I don't know, whatever else I might come up with. So that was basically, yeah, the story of my gaming and my solo gaming life, of how I became a solo gamer or a gamer in general. And now maybe you have a little bit more information about me as a person as well. Got to know me a little better. Yeah. So even though this was not a gameplay video, maybe maybe you still find this interesting. So, but I'm feeling way better now than I did a couple of days ago. So I think you probably don't have to wait too long. Maybe I can get a video out on the weekend, but I can't make any promises. But yeah, this is it for this Friday night. As always, thank you for watching. And as always, stay safe and stay healthy. And I should have kept my own advice, but I didn't. Yeah, like I said, I'm feeling much better already. Yeah, so this is it, folks. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I hope I will see you soon in the next video when we get back to the table or get the dice out. So yeah, that's it. Until the next video, bye bye.